Is there anybody there?
All right, everybody, welcome back to this week's edition of So You Want to Be an IT podcast. If you're back for another round, you know the deal. We're a podcast aimed at those just starting out their journey in the vast world of IT. We talk about breaking in, climbing some of those big hills, breaking down some of those walls as an IT beginner, right? So breaking in, climbing the ladder, finding your niche, and everything literally in between. So I'm your host, Pat. You can find me on Twitter at PatAllen182. You can find the show on Twitter as well at SYWBIIT, the acronym for So You Want to Be an IT. So we're pretty active on Twitter, so come say hello. My man Dean over there, he's on Twitter as well at DeanMacUK. Dean, what's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, Pat, long time no speak. How you doing?
I know, it's been a while. It's been a few days, a few weeks. It's been a rough week, so we're getting back to the mic and getting back to some normalcy.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's been a crazy couple of weeks. So with, everything going down, we're back here and we got a great guest on today's show. So yeah, we're good, right?
We got a guest today, guys, John from What the Shell podcast. So, hey, John, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. It's been, as you said, a bit of a crazy week, but happy to be on.
Yep, here we are. So we're talking to John. You reached out to the show a couple weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago now, and we appreciate you reaching out and being a guest and coming on and talking and seeing what you're all about. And I've listened to the podcast, quite a few episodes, and they're really well done. So nice job there. And it's security related, right? So we're all, Dean and I are security nerds from way back. So that's right up our alley. So John, actually, before we get into the podcast, right? So why don't you sort of tell us what you're doing now, some of your background, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I am a bit of a mouthful, but I'm a threat and vulnerability management engineer. And what that actually entitles is basically as new vulnerabilities and exploits come out, I do a bit of analysis, figure out how it impacts our environment, what we need to do to keep our exposure out to a minimum, and work with whatever teams I need to really make sure that we're not going to be impacted by anything that could be nefarious to a company, right? Like, really, we're the guys that are going to end up bugging you to patch your stuff is what it comes down to.
Nice.
So if you ever hear someone email you say, patch your Windows, patch your Linux, it's probably coming from me on my update.
Nice. Look at that. That's awesome. That sounds pretty good. So how long have you been doing that?
I've been doing this for about 3 years now, but I've been in the field for coming up on 11.
Okay.
So I got my start way back in the help desk when I was in the Air Force in the early 2010s.
Okay.
I joined there, decided that I wanted to get into IT, and that was one of the positions they had open, and ended up stationed at my home state in an Air National Guard unit doing help desk for them, right? Getting into the very, I think, entry level of IT there.
Nice.
Okay.
That's pretty awesome.
That's cool. Yeah. That's interesting. So you're in the Air Force. So did you stay on the military side for a while and then sort of convert over, or did you get into the private sector right away? What did that look like?
So I started a little bit in the military side, but being in the Air National Guard side of it offered some pretty unique benefits for me. So I don't know if you're familiar with how it works, but really for most of the Air National Guard is people who work normal jobs like you and me. And then 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer, they'll come in and do their training. But if you're there full time during the week, your unit isn't fully there. And I was the only person in my shop during the week, which meant I got a lot of exposure to a lot of things above my level. I got to help, and the help desk was still relatively new to the Air Force as a career field at the time. So I'm learning these new processes, working with other bases, trying to figure out how we're going to implement. On top of that, being a part of a small unit during the week, I got to work with other parts of it. So I got to work with our network guys. I got to work with our cyber guys. I got to work with our sysadmins as a part of this unit during the week to help them since they were understaffed, which got me this wide breadth of exposure to all these different concepts.
Nice.
Awesome.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was great. We had the whole point for the kind of unit I was in was like, we could deploy an entire domain in 3 days anywhere in the world was the aim for it. So being able to work and figure out how to do all these policies from the ground up, or what we needed to do to set up a international or satellite driven communication domain, was something that was profoundly above my head at the time.
That's wild.
Extremely,
That is
yeah.
really wild. So, just because I'm a space freak and you were a part of the Air Force, John, are there aliens? Do they exist? Let's start there.
I think it's safe to say that I can comment for the entirety of the United States Air Force when I say yes.
Yes, I got confirmation. I don't have to watch the History Channel anymore. I know all I need to know.
Yeah, they made the pyramids, didn't you see that
That's right.
special?
Ancient Aliens has served me well, but I got it right from the horse's mouth. Thank you, John. That's awesome. That's funny. Now, that's really cool. So from the help desk spot, did you know you wanted to be in cybersecurity right away, or did that take you a little bit to sort of play in different niches and you just found cyber was the one you liked the
I liked cyber, but I didn't really have exposure to the kind of stuff I do right now there. Really what I had there was a good mentor. I had this guy named Craig who really worked with me every weekend. He'd text me during the week. He'd come in on his weekdays every now and then and really push me to do things. So I'm still new to the field. He's like, all right, well, I want you to make a project, build me something from scratch. And in this case, it was the fairly new at the time Raspberry Pi. He's like, I want you to build something on a Pi for me, and we're going to bring it out and attach it to the domain. So this guy was constantly not letting you settle in your position. Once you were good at something, he found something new for you to not be good at and would wait for you to be good at it and then rinse,
That's
repeat
huge.
over and over
That's
again.
so huge.
And I do, honestly, I think credit the start of my career to him. I think in that position, I was flush with good mentors who helped me figure out and understand. And I didn't know in the Air Force that I wanted to be in cyber until probably the end of my career. I was in it for 6 years, but only 3 of them were full-time.
Okay.
So a couple years in, I switched out of that and got a job as a network security engineer. So firewalls, email gateways, web security appliances. We were a big Cisco shop, and I did that for a healthcare provider for the state that I'm in right now.
Okay.
So that got me, I think, more into the cybersecurity side of it than the Air Force did, where I honestly just took one of the first jobs I could get in a security related field. And suddenly I was working with firewalls. I was working with processing different exceptions for what would go into place and why certain things would be allowed and not allowed, and starting to get these concepts in my head. And at the time, I think I got introduced to my first phone scanner appliance around then. And that was where I was like, hey, this is pretty neat. I can set this up on my home server. I can do something pretty easy like this and start playing outside of work.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
So have you got a pretty sweet home network then, where you do vulnerability scans on like sort of end stations and things of that nature?
I do now. At the time, I was a VirtualBox. I would set up a VM. I opened up OpenVAS as its own installation, played around with what I could find, and really was just looking for whatever free tool I could get, right? And just playing around with that and trying to apply it. But one thing I think, I don't know, you guys as network guys might be able to corroborate some of this. When there's old equipment that goes away, I don't ever think I've seen it actually hit the trash. It'll usually end up in someone's house.
True. Normally, yeah.
If it's not being retired back to a manufacturer, the trash never really sees the networking equipment. So I had a PIX firewall in my house for a
that's
while.
An old one, right? That's a really old.
That's some memories right
that
there.
was end of life when I came into the field.
That's awesome.
So I was playing around with that in my spare time, trying to figure out, okay, well, I can break through scanning if I do this, or I can, depending on what ports I allow on the firewall, okay, I'm going to allow this, and really just, creating a bunch of what if scenarios in my head.
That's pretty cool. No, I like that. I like that a lot. That's a cool story. Yeah, so I'm interested there as far as you're, again, sort of into the help desk realm and things of that nature. We talk about on the show all the time about starting at that level, right, at the help desk, and getting a feel for the IT industry as a whole, what your business does, the purpose it serves, if you will, and then sort of growing up and grooming from there. You mentioned the mentor, which we've mentioned before on this show. A lot of people do have mentors, and that points them in the right direction and keeps them on task, if you will. I think that's huge for today's folks coming in, trying to sort of find their way and get there as, I don't want to say as quick as possible, but I've also feel like, and saw this on Twitter the other day, that there's some, and maybe you can speak to this, there's some sort of like weird time right now where we're like, there's like an entitlement in these folks that are in the industry, and they don't want to put in the work. They want to go right to the mid to top level and this, that, and the next. It doesn't necessarily work like that. There's a whole path there. And if you're just starting, some people's path are quicker than others, but you're going to have to take a path, and nobody starts at the top, sort of thing. Do you see a lot of that, like in today's realm, of that entitlement aspect of, oh, everybody wants the title, nobody wants to put the work in, sort of thing?
I'll see some of that online. If I'm browsing the subreddits, I'll see occasional posts like that. And really what I think happens is people don't understand that you got to play the game a little
Yep.
bit. So I think it's speaking to a mentor, really, it's doing a couple things for you at that point, right? You're not just learning from someone. Now, that mentor, if you're reflecting good on yourself to them, they're a reference for you.
Yeah.
They are someone who will fight for you, because it goes two ways. Like if you demonstrate that the mentorship is paying off, they will come to bat for you. And IT, let alone security, is the biggest little field I've ever seen, where I'm constantly running into people that know each other or that I've worked with years ago,
Yep.
right? So when you have a good mentor, it's really more than just learning. It's, if you want to move up quick, like, get a mentor. There's a lot of people who I think are just lone wolves. They're like, I'll do it on my own, but they don't know that to play the game, you got to put yourself out there. You got to network a little bit. You got to make these mentor connections, because not only is it going to pay off knowledge wise, it's going to pay off, I hate to say, politically, as you're moving position to position. And then to go back to your question, like on the help desk side of it, name another position in IT that has its fingers in as many things as the help desk, right? You are constantly either, even if it's just assigning tickets to other teams, you're working with these people who are contacting you. And if you're good at your job and you're doing that well, even if it's just at a help desk, there's no reason you can't go to your manager and someone else in your company who's doing a position you think is interesting and say, hey, can I shadow a day? Can I learn what you do a little bit? I'm meeting my project goals. I'm meeting my ticket assignments or whatever. I'd like to sit down and shadow this person for a day, see what they do, and see if it's something that I'd be interested in. I've done it on that side, and I've had people do it to what I do now. And I think on the help desk in particular, if you can get in on that ground level, some people think it's beneath them, but really, I didn't know what I wanted to do at 22, 23. So if you're just coming into the field, I think it's a good set of binoculars to really look for what you want to find.
No, that's a good point. And I'll share a story of the entitlement that I've seen. And it's, some places are worse than others, but I'll share a story, and it's whatever. It's our podcast. I can talk about what I want. So I was at a place, and there was a guy there who wanted to sort of be like a Linux admin, whatever you want to call it. Like, he was sort of learning Linux, but he wasn't quite there yet into the field of, he can call himself like a Linux admin. Like, he was still learning, and he had a ways to go and whatever. And Linux is cool. I've dabbled with it, but I'm not a master at it, and I don't pretend to be. But, and he's trying to do this and automate and all this stuff, and he was throwing out all these buzzwords, and I'm just like, okay, let's go on about my day. And at this company that we worked at, he was asked then to go and, I don't know, pick up PCs or clean PCs with the canned air and whatever. And yeah, so he was over there, and he thought that job was beneath him because he wanted to be this Linux master and whatever. And he thought this job was beneath him. And he, like, I guess I wasn't there. I guess he either spouted off in front of the client that this job was beneath him, or he said it to somebody and somebody overheard and then went to the boss and blah, blah, blah. So then the boss of this client came back and talked to the CIO / co-owner of the company that I was working for and basically said, here's what he said, this, that, the third. And I get the co-owner was like fed up with it, this and that kind of thing. And basically the second he heard that, the co-owner called him, said, get back here. And he was fired on the spot, like literally on the spot. And I was like, oh man, it's lunchtime, I gotta go. It's like one of those like awkward, odd moments. You don't know what to do. Like you're just kind of standing around like someone just got their ass chewed out and basically got their walking papers, that kind of thing. But that's the entitlement you're talking about. Just because you want to do something, which is fine to have goals, but you're hired to do other things. Depending on the size of your company, you're hired to do other things, and you're a multiple tooled guy or person, gal, whatever, of that thing. So, but like in my mind, I'm like, dude, you were getting paid your same hourly rate to do an easy layup job. Like, just do it, and so what? You know what I mean? It was just this weird. He didn't have to be all this brash and, well, like it wasn't in his niche, or it wasn't what he wanted to do. So he like spouted off, and it cost him his job. And I'm sure that happens other places, but it does happen. And this entitlement is weird. And like, where do you get off being like, oh, I only want to do this? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's like there's this subset of people who are come into the field and are like, I want to be a superstar, right? But not realize that to get there. I think one lesson I've learned is that grunt work and all those, even if it's just being a ticket or a queue jockey for opening tickets and taking requests, there's a reason behind it. It kind of sucks. It does. Yeah. But how is someone going to trust you to maybe upgrade a production piece of equipment if they haven't seen you properly handle all the stuff that's menial on the day-to-day that doesn't really matter? Because if you can't be trusted to handle all that little stuff, why am I going to give you
big stuff,
a production project that could negatively impact the company or negatively impact your uptime, and you have not demonstrated to me that you can do that? So it's like they want to get immediately to, I'm the guy who re-architected the entire network, and not be like, maybe I don't want to add the static route because I think that's beneath me.
No, that's a good point. And like you said, I think that's huge. So anybody out there listening, you got to be able to do the little stuff before they trust you with the big stuff. Like you got to be able to walk on the sidewalk before they hand you the keys to the car and you go on a road. Like it's just what it is. It's the nature of the job, and it's just the way things are. And you just try to suck up as much as you can, and suck up as far as knowledge. Try to do that as much as you can, and
like you said, it's a layup.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, you're getting paid the same hourly amount to do whatever you're asked of. So if you get a layup, I would love a layup at work every now and then. Like I'm in firewalls all day long and putting out fires. I would love to sit there and work through a spreadsheet. Like that is, oh man, I need that every now and then. Give me something to like not look at a Palo Alto firewall for hours on end.
Yeah, if I'm beating my head against the wall trying to figure out why something's not working, sometimes I'll take a step back and just handle an easy request, get out of it, be productive in a different way, and get my mind back in it.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, I feel like there is a little bit of entitlement going on at the moment. But again, you got to do the easy stuff before they can give you the hard stuff. You got to walk before you can run. So do the best you can with it, and sort of stay in your lane, if you will, if that's a phrase to use for now, and go from there and walk the line. And then when something does come up, you're the rock star, and who knows what happens from there.
Right. You can be the hot shot but handle the regular ticket stuff. Like you can spend your time at work doing those mundane things, come home and prep yourself for other things. You can be doing certifications, you can be doing home projects, like setting up your own environment. And sometimes, especially entry level, there is that kind of fiscal entry barrier that can happen. But nowadays, there's also not. There's so many free tools out there that I wish were available when I was first getting started, because at that time you had to pay in.
Yep.
You had to really buy in or get lucky.
50-50 now, I think. Yeah, the tools are free now, but the equipment's more expensive. Like to get just the price stuff now is just let's see if you can buy it. So
It's insane.
yeah,
Yep.
just to buy it or get your hands on anything half decent now is pretty hard. So
Right.
I know there's a tons of free stuff out there, but if you've got hardware or equipment to run it on, is a different story. So yeah,
You'll have to virtualize everything.
and that's it. But you still need hardware to even accomplish that. So
it's tough. Like there is that fiscal barrier to entry thing. You can find, okay, I'm going to a certification, start studying for ads, that I'm going to look for a project that I might be able to learn about or see someone else's project that is tangentially related to what I'm doing. The amount of resources that are out there, even if it's not building something, is just amazing. And you can be your hotshot that way, right? Come into work saying, hey, boss, I've been studying this and I think that I can apply it here. But don't just act like you're going to go in there and change the entire process that has been stood up for however many years.
it's true. Yeah.
Doesn't happen.
Very rarely, yeah. It's incremental baby steps normally, for sure.
It's funny you say that, John, because now, like when I was coming up and out of school and trying to, get my foot in and doing the customer service and the tech support stuff I did and this and that, like when you're 20, I don't know, I would say 22 to maybe 20, 27, 28, sometimes even 30, like you're full of, I'm going to change the world. People are going to listen to me and I know what I'm doing and blah, blah, blah. And then like you hit sort of 30 and you're in the industry a while and now you're like, yeah, these people have their feet set in their ways and they're in cement shoes and they're not changing. So you just keep the lights on and keep it going, brother. I feel like that a lot.
I think you got to break out. There's a point where you stop being shiny eye excited about things.
Yeah.
And
ambition's not the right word because you have it. It's just a different form.
But it's like recognizing that you're not as hot as you think you are, because I see my Facebook memories, for example, from 10 years ago, and I'm talking it up. I'm saying, yeah, I'm super pumped. I'm going in tonight. It's like midnight on a Saturday and I'm upgrading our firewall. I'm a badass. And now I'm like, why was I bragging about that? Why?
Right.
I didn't know any better at the time. I thought I was doing something awesome because I'm going in and I'm upgrading to the newest version of Cisco ASA. God, they really pulled one over on me. Huh?
Yep, I've been there. Yeah. Yeah, people were sleeping at that time and you're in a cold data center floor. Like who made out on that deal?
So it's like when you're able to recognize that what you're doing it's important. Yeah, it's absolutely very important, but it's not that hotshot project. I think it opens your eyes up. It humbles you a little bit, and you're like, okay, well, I can put a little more perspective on the issue now.
Yeah, I hear you. I did that all the time. Like I'm doing this and I'm doing this, and why don't they do this? And why don't they do this? And then you get a little longer in the tooth, if you will, in the IT space, and you're just like, oh yeah, that's why. It's one of those things you kind of just gotta roll with the punches.
So I'm curious on your side, because you said something that piqued my interest a little bit. Did you go straight from high school to degree to field, or did you do your degree mid-career on this?
To be honest with you, I did in high school. I went to Votech, and they had the Cisco Networking Academy as part of the Votech. So I did that junior and senior year, mainly junior year. And then I went to community college around here for, I don't know, like a year and a half. And then I got bored with that and went right to work. So I technically don't have a degree at all. I don't even have an associate's. I do 12 credits for an associate's, and the wife keeps yelling at me just to go back and finish it because you got so far, like just do it. I'm just like, meh, that kind of thing. So I technically don't have a degree. And so I've been working in the field and just doing jobs and jumping jobs every 2 to 2.5 years. And you eventually just climb your ladder that way. Titles change, money changes, and you just find a spot.
Yeah, the jumping jobs thing definitely helps. I know my dad comes from a kind of you stay one job your whole life kind of mentality. So when I first started jumping, he was like, why are you doing this? But I never got better benefits than when I jumped.
You need to be jumping at least every 2 or 3 years.
I set a little goal for myself. I'm like, okay, I always aim, and now it's a little harder as I hit more senior levels, but I aim to say, if I'm not promoted in 4 years, I need to reevaluate why I'm there. So my first position at network security engineer position, a couple years in, I was like, I think I'm doing the work for promotion. They agreed that I was doing the work of the next level up, but there were some issues trying to promote me. And the person who was above my boss never really had been hearing it. So I found a different position that was a level 2 in the same company and just applied for that in the switch teams. And that was when they came to me and said, "Hey, we'll promote you." I was like, "No, it shouldn't have to take me leaving for you to promote me, right? I'm still going to be in the company, but I'm moving to a different team." And that's where I moved into from network security into information security. Uh, Keeping that mentality in mind, because I don't want to let the promise of next year you'll get what you want run its course. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Well, it's that, and then people like positions change. Your boss is not your boss anymore, and then what was promised is there's a new person put in place, and then he doesn't know about those or she doesn't know about those promises. So yeah, you're back at square one again. I feel your pain there because I've been through that experience, and yeah, it doesn't help your career in that aspect at all.
I just think that everyone would do a little better if every 3 to 4 years they really evaluated why they're still in a position if they haven't had any kind of movement.
Sure.
Are you fine doing this? And there are people who are fine making, I think, a career out of a position. That's not knocking that, but if you have upward ambitions and you're being fairly static, are you doing something outside of work that you're prepping it? Are you studying? Are you going for any certs or a degree or something? Or are you just there for year number 4, not sure why nothing's changed when you haven't done anything?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. You're just floating in space at that point.
Yeah.
And I'll say,
how far do you got to float?
I think that there's a little cheat I like to tell people where companies will typically have separate budgets for certifications and college tuition reimbursements. And most IT degrees, so like my degree is in information technology with a focus in cybersecurity. If you have CompTIA certifications, and I think a couple Cisco, I have my CISP that credited, you can get college credits for certifications, so you can double dip a little bit.
Nice.
So
That helps.
really benefits if you have them.
Yeah, that helps. That
Yeah,
really
it's
does
huge.
help. I wanted to talk about that, John, because we talked a little bit before we hit the record button, and Dean, this is sort of before you jumped on, but we talked about some of the really high walls in the cybersecurity space to break in to that space. And you made a good comment, John, as far as, okay, the entry level to cybersecurity positions are almost like, well, they're impossible in today's world because cybersecurity is such a huge chunk of today's data fabric, if you will. And then there's also you said it was, the entry level in cybersecurity position is more of like a mid-level position in any other specialty or something close to that. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that because I hear that a lot from guys like on LinkedIn I follow, so like Neil Bridges and Josh Mason and some of those guys that are really heavy in the security space. They say that all the time. I'm curious, and the high walls, like, what do you think we can do to sort of break that down and give these people a chance to have the wall not so high?
I think that, so to go back to the comment itself, I was talking about how an entry level position in cybersecurity, in information and security, that field, typically you're talking a core level position isn't actually a entry level as most people think of it. It's not something that you'll typically come through straight out of college or straight from a non-working career to come in and maybe be 3 to 5 years in the field at that point. I think currently these days, it's more of I didn't know that field was a thing from younger people, but I've seen most young people get in the field either through internships or through adjacent moving in the company after they've been in a few years. I haven't seen a lot of success in people coming straight out of school into the field because what we typically look for is some level of familiarity with concepts that they just don't have. So in my specific position, I'm looking for vulnerability analysis. So I might ask someone what some of the bigger vulnerabilities of the last few years are look for context of how they would treat it, how big of a threat they'd see it as, things like that. And frankly, you're not going to be looking at that when you're in school because you're going to be focusing on your studies. So you are inherently creating this gap that you don't even know is there. Or there are tools that are so specific to cybersecurity that they don't teach at school. I don't think there's a course that covers Splunk, right? Which is a major tool for analyzing logs and creating specific dashboards or reports from information that streams in from across your network. You don't get training in some of the stuff that you need at the start of cybersecurity. But what you do see is a lot of people who have been in IT for a few years who have gotten some general exposure to that and who know enough about the concepts that you'll see mid-level cybersecurity guys be like, okay, I can train this person up because A, I know they work well because they have a resume to prove it, and B, they're familiar with the concepts because we use this all across the enterprise.
That makes a lot of sense. That really does. Yeah, I hear that a lot from folks in the cybersecurity space that walls are too high and try to get these folks into the right positions. And there's a massive shortage of cybersecurity folks, right? I mean, you hear it all the time. People getting hacked and all this stuff, and then there's all these empty positions that don't get filled, and you're like, why? Why is that? And you're like, oh yeah, you need 10,000 years of experience in this for a stock analyst. You're like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
I think it's the hardest part is just getting through your HR interviews. Honestly, like if you can get past whatever front facing filter they have in place and you can show a demonstrable initiative or eagerness, I think that's the number one thing. But that front facing HR stuff is typically really hard because I think there are some unrealistic standards that get put into place that no one can really control who's on the actual team that's hiring. One thing I do think it is shifting a little bit though. I do think as more and more schools are offering actual security degrees in the last few years, I'm starting to see, at least in hiring, this swap where previously I would say 90% of people in the cybersecurity field were somewhat passionate about security, right? Like they can talk security, they are eager to talk security. But as it becomes more publicized, we're starting to see people enter a field that are very much just treating this as a day job, which is fine. It's a completely acceptable thing to do. But there is just this inherent shift that I think is starting to happen because all these people are now starting to come out of those 4-year programs that were just introduced and into the cyber workforce. So it's been really interesting to see that come into play as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have noticed that the folks have been latched on to the cybersecurity degrees and they attach to colleges or institutes of higher learning, things of that nature. So I guess just for my own knowledge and maybe for some folks that are out there, but what does a typical, you said you have an information science degree with specialty in cybersecurity. What do some of those courses look like? What did you actually take? Is it based off of networking and then you sort of move into cybersecurity because you have to know the underlay to know the overlay, for lack of a better term? Or what does a typical course look like? Is it math? Is it science? Is it mixture of both? Or
I should preface this with I didn't get my degree until 7 or so years into the field. And I only got it as a bit of a check mark so that if I wanted to go for higher level positions, if that was a requirement, I could beat that front facing HR filter that I was talking about. It's a little bit of a unique use case there, but what I had was largely lab based. So I was doing my degree online and it
okay,
was a lab environment, a lot of manual exercises. I had a network security course that was specifically aimed at having you learn how to, configure these IDSs, IPSs, firewalls, and then try to break through them. But doing it in a very railroad environment where you can't really go off and do your own thing. You're really just paying attention to how this behaves.
mm-hmm.
There's a lot of also like boring reporting, like a lot of Gantt charts I had to make, which don't love, but I don't regret because I actually able to put that to use last year for the first time.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I'm just trying to give some folks a little flavor of what a cybersecurity degree typically, looks like. Do you know if they're cut from the same cloth no matter like what institute you go to, or is it specified or tailored to whatever, college, university, whatever?
I would expect it's similar, and I would expect a lot of labs. You'll start off typically as a normal degree would, like your first 2 years are just broad classes, right? But as you go in, it'll slowly hammer it in to what specifically you're looking at. And for me, that was learning a lot about how IT functions in an organization. So getting a lot of different exposures into, I had a course on risk. I had a course on network security. I had a course on cyber law and ethics that I really thought was probably one of my favorite courses that I had taken there. But it gives you that, what's it say, the mile wide view of
Okay.
what you're about to go into. And then for me, I had my specialized courses that were specifically geared towards security, which was that network security stuff. It was writing vulnerability reports. It was reporting to management on risk and things like that.
Okay. Cool. No, that sounds good. I'm intrigued by the cyber law side of things as well. I think that's a really cool field to sort of go down the rabbit hole on, as far as, since this is all, and I'm gonna say relatively new, because cybersecurity has been around for a little bit, but I think now it's being thrust to the forward, or thrust to the front of the line, I should say, when you hear about a company's been hacked every other week, and you're like, now it's such a pivotal part, and has such eyes and money and dollars and cents tied to it, right? To keep people's data and the company's data, out of the hands of the bad guys. It's interesting to see the law aspect on the other side of that, because guys like you and I and Dean, we deal with the bits and bytes of it, but there's a whole other side of the coin, where law and how those things are written, and processes, procedures, things of that nature.
Well, look at the last 25 years and how cyber law has changed. You go back into the 90s and you talk about someone like Kevin Mitnick, who, big in the hacking field, he was put into solitary confinement because someone told a judge that he could whistle into a phone and launch a nuclear weapon. Not at all true, but that was how non-existent cyber understanding was in law at that time. And you fast forward 10 years or so to 2004, you've got FBI and the Secret Service hijacking a semi-dark web site, trying to get people to come in and actually turn themselves in because they, quote, have their IP addresses as a part of that Operation Firewall that they launched in the early 2000s, right? So they're trying to get people to turn themselves in as almost like we supposedly have you. And then you move on to someone like Jonathan James, who was almost framed for the big TJX hack in 2008. And they were just going to try to pin it on him because of some pretty circumstantial evidence that didn't quite pan out for him. It's just constantly shifting, and the goalposts are constantly changing. And someone who committed that same crime that I told you Mitnick did in the early 90s gets a much less significant piece of jail time right now, because examples are constantly being made and the law is constantly being developed there.
That's interesting. I do like the story of Kevin Mitnick. I actually had, when I was in community college, I had a security class, because networks and security are closely tied together. I had to take a course and whatnot, and we each got a hacker that we had to report on, and a college book report, if you will. And I actually got Kevin Mitnick, so I had to read the whole story and the Art of Deception, his book, and the whole deal. It was really interesting.
Yeah, he's probably one of when I launched my show, he was the first episode that I did. And that was one of the coolest stories I had read. Like, I'm talking about a kid who is gaming the LA bus system. I'm like, okay. And he's on the run. I encourage anyone to read about him. He's got his own company that he works for security now. And he came out on the other side of the law in a good way. Some people aren't as lucky.
No, that's true. No, that's very true. Now, that's a good segue, because you said your show. So why don't we flip the coin a little bit and put on your content creator hat, if you will. So tell us a little bit about the background of your show. What was the driving factor, your inspiration, sort of thing, and sort of start there and see where that goes.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to semi-flip it right back to this show, because I operate a podcast called What the Shell. I'm about to publish episode 12 next week on it, but a driving factor for me doing a podcast was forward career growth. I hadn't been put in a position until the last few years where I'm constantly presenting to people. And I recognized pretty early on that I need to get better at public speaking. I need to get better talking about something to an audience that might not have a complete understanding of it. Mainly in my field, I need to get better at explaining high level vulnerabilities to people who have no idea what I'm talking about. And
Right.
I have very much the mentality of I could talk for an hour about an exploit and the intricacies of how it works, but no one else wants to hear that.
Right.
No one else
Right. Yeah.
needs.
Big
No one else
execs
needs
don't
to hear it.
care. Yeah. I hear
So
you.
yeah, I was actually my boss late last year. I just need to get better at this, and he was like, "Yeah, if I feel like it's something that you need to work on, and I'll help you work on it." And I ended up listening to Darknet Diaries for a bit and thinking I really like the idea of telling these stories of hacks, of hackers, or cybersecurity incidents. And I was like, all right, I'll try that. And I started scripting out episodes to of stuff that I really liked and stuff that interests me, but doing it in a way where I either leave out some of the super technical stuff or I boil it down in a way that I hope someone who has no input in the field can understand, because I think that there are a lot of these stories that don't get told or don't get told in a way that feels accessible to people.
Now that's a good point, and we love Darknet Diaries. Jack is great. He's really a great storyteller, and he really does some great work over there. So that's a podcast that you security folks are interested in. Darknet Diaries is totally one of the best up there. So shout out to Darknet Diaries and Jack. He's a really good guy. I've spoken to him a couple times, just chatting back and forth and whatnot. Really good dude. So if you're into that, Darknet Diaries is your jam.
I think that my strategy has worked. I do know there are several people in my Discord that are students that are listening to this and gaining exposure to the field through that.
Yeah.
Through some of the episodes that I made. I'm like, okay, I succeeded in what I want to do. And I can say that I come into, at the very least, discussions with people I've never met with maybe a little bit more confidence than I used to. So it's working. And now I just think I'm doing it because it's fun. Like, I think I've gotten to the point where if I prepare adequately, and this is something that it's really taught me how to do, is prepare for these discussions, I could present to people who I have no familiarity with on a topic that I don't really think they have an idea of what it's about in a way that is much better than I used to.
Cool. That's really cool. So I've listened to a couple episodes. It's just you, right, John? There's no like guests or interviews or anything like that.
It is just me. I have had one episode with a guest. I did an episode on skip tracing, which is open source intelligence and finding people based on what information you have publicly available. And then I knew someone who was a skip tracer, someone who actually goes out and finds people for a living. And so I had him on as a guest, but the main episode format is just a script where it's only me. I'll write it, edit it, record it, all from my closet or my desk, and able, it's only me. So it's been a unique experience in that route.
So I guess my next question is, how do you find your content then? Do you pick a hack and talk about it? Do you do some preventability, like, hey, do this instead? Don't try to get hacked. Here's how to do that sort of thing. Like, what's your thought process behind actual content?
Tell you, it's very simple. If I see something that's interesting, I put it in my bookmark tab in Chrome that says podcast ideas. And then I come back to it and see how big of a story it is. So I've done hacks. I've done the Colonial Pipeline hack, for example, was one of my first episodes where I walk through the start to finish how that happened and break it down in a way that I think people will be able to understand. Or I'll do a hacking group. Like I've done the Lazarus group out of North Korea. I've done a breakdown of what they've done and a separate episode on their Sony hack or Anonymous. That was my most recent episode, was the rise of the anonymous hacktivism kind of trend from the mid 2000s. And I just bookmark these ideas, see what I can find in terms of timelines if I need it, and start writing and see what I can do that way. I have a very loose outline on my script and I'll just record.
Nice. I like that. Dean, it looks like you're thinking and I see the smoke.
No, that's just you're a very brave guy. I wouldn't be talking or reporting about those guys, but each to their own, I suppose. We do live in a free country, but I still don't want North Korea or Russia knocking on my door. Put it that way.
That's funny. No, that's funny.
But you're braver than me.
There's a lot of anxiety in this field in general, I think, because you're dealing with so many things. Like, if part of your day-to-day work is talking about nation-state attackers and what they're doing to your enterprise, I feel like there's an inherent bit of anxiety. And if I can one day worry about my podcast because my episode on North Korea is ticking off some people, I think I'll be pretty happy. I think I'll say I'm pretty successful at that point.
But for how long though?
Hey, Dean, remember that guy John we had on the podcast a few years ago?
Such a nice guy. I know.
He stopped tweeting. His website hasn't been updated. What happened to him?
It's weird. His last tweet said I'm going to Pyongyang, having a nice vacation.
Spending 2 weeks over in yeah.
No, but I mean, at the very end of it all, I don't offer, I guess I do. I put a little bit of conjecture in there. But
of course you do. That's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, no shame in that.
I think, like, with the anonymous stuff in particular lately, that one was the only one that I think I've put out where I felt a slight twinge of concern, because anonymous as a whole tends to skew towards these young kids who have no concept of the fact that there can be consequences for cyber actions. But also, at the other side of it, they only really know how to launch their DDoS programs. So anyone who's anonymous that, in my opinion, has skills worth a damn, has separated out into some of these smaller sects, like lulsec back in the day. That was one of them. But there are these smaller groups now. It's not what it used to be. And they're still active. They're still doing good and bad things, depending on what lens you're looking at it through. But that was the only one that I put out an episode, and I'm like, yeah, I could see someone getting the wrong idea from this and trying to prove me wrong. But at the end of the day, if that happens, I'll make an episode about that.
That's it. Yeah.
Good for you. Yeah, it's more publicity.
They're just feeding you.
Yeah,
just feeding you content at that point.
That's what I say. That's awesome.
That's awesome. John, do you have any other thing you want to talk about? We're creeping up on the hour, and we're gonna wrap it up and get out of here. But the floor is yours, my man.
I think if I could leave anyone listening to this episode with one thing, it's ask someone to be a mentor. Very rarely have I ever had someone say no to that. Ask someone to shadow them. Like I said, just ask questions. Don't be a person who just goes in and does nothing. That's how you end up stuck. And if you're the guy who's asking questions, always trying to learn, then that's good enough for your reputation. Better that, someone who's coming in trying to be that gung-ho tech wizard can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Any recommendations on courses to get into your kind of field for our listeners?
If you're talking about entry-level stuff, I would say go for your CompTIA certs. Easy enough. They're the best dollar to reward ratio, I think, because they're such a staple in the community, right? Do your plus, your net plus, or your sec plus. Contrary to popular belief, you don't need all three of those. Pick one or two, right?
Okay.
Only do A plus if you're really going to try to hammer in on help desk. Otherwise, if you think you're confident enough, do sec plus and net plus. Those will get you into the core concepts in a way that I think will give you a leg up on some other people.
Sweet. Okay. Anything else after that in terms of, like, once you've attained those, anything to sort of refine or hone your skills?
It depends, right? If your company is going to pay for it, go do a SANS course. That's a bit more expensive. So don't pay for it yourself on that one. Make sure you have a company that will pay for that on your end.
Sponsor. Yeah.
Is that SANS?
Yep. So they're this company that is very large of a cybersecurity training field. I've done penetration testing certifications for them. I've done incident handling certifications, and currently I'm doing the enterprise vulnerability assessment certification for them. They carry a lot of weight because they come with all these labs and It's effectively a 40-hour course that you do on your own time with labs, and the certification comes out of it is typically very sought after.
Oh, very nice. And is that an exam based, or is it all just labs?
It's exam based.
Okay, nice. And is that you do at home, or is that you go to a testing center?
That one, you'll go to a testing center, and you can actually bring in some reference materials, because typically what they do in these is they will take the core material and ask you questions that you can't just pluck an answer out of. You'll have to do some interpretation of it.
Okay.
For anyone that's super gung-ho and wants to get into the more hacking side of it, you can eventually upgrade yourself to an OSCP, which is probably one of the more sought after penetration testing certifications. That's the one that is probably one of the hardest ones. I've taken it, but not passed. It's a certification that is, you will sit down in front of a computer and someone is watching you try to hack into a network for a full 24 hours, and you'll have to write up a report on it.
Holy moly, that sounds intense.
It's a very
Yeehaw.
interesting certification. Not one that I'm going to continue going for, I don't think, because I don't necessarily need it, but I'm very happy I took the course that's tied to it.
Oh, because you got
Nice.
some information through the study process.
Yeah, you get so much
gain
information just through that.
Okay, sweet. Nice. That's awesome. That's good insight. Thank you.
Anytime.
Yeah, that's cool. And oh, by the way, we haven't spoke since my Palo Alto test last Monday, and I did pass. So there is happy days on that. So no more stress on the Palo
Congrats.
Alto thing.
Congratulations.
Got that out of the way, which is nice. So thank you. Thank you, work for the boot camp, and then subsequently the free voucher to attempt this exam. So all good there. And yeah, so that was good. And the next one up for me is the CCNP security. So the S Core, I guess they call it. So it'll be dealing with Cisco ICE and security concepts, things of that nature. So that's next. So I think that was it. John, you want to tell the people, tell the fine people where they can find you at, where they can find the show, and plug your socials? Where are you at?
Absolutely. You can find What the Shell on any podcast platform that you've got. I have a website that also has all the episodes on it. It's whattheshellpod.com. And you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at shell_pod.
Nice. There you go. I like it.
Consistent names, yeah.
I like it.
The trick
That's
was
very-
getting all that stuff done before I launched it so no one else could steal it from under me.
Then doing two-factor authentication so no one can steal it too.
There's a Russian account that did shell_podcast. They haven't tried to copy me or anything. I don't know what the game was, but I got a follow request from shell_podcast. I was like, okay, come on now.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. So, guys, I highly recommend John's podcast if you're into the security game or curious about it and want to learn more about the cybersecurity world and that side of the IT world. It's very informative. It's very well done. So, John, this has been awesome. Thanks a bunch for coming to hang out. Give us an hour or so of your time, and we'll continue to move forward in the cybersecurity game. And we'll definitely have you back on the show, man. This has been awesome.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to coming on again at some point.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Really
Thanks, John. And also,
so, yeah, we're going to wrap up and get out of here. We try to right around an hour. So I think we're at that hour mark. So get on with your day, and we appreciate you hanging and listening to us chat a little bit. One thing I wanted to mention was that we're very humbled by this, but we have been nominated for the Cisco Champion IT Blog Awards as a finalist. So the finalist awards have been out for a couple weeks now. And if you follow us on Twitter, you've seen us tweet about it and things of that nature, but it's the first mention of it on the podcast. So if you like the show and you want to give us some cred with Cisco, some street cred, if you will, the voting website will be in the show notes of the podcast. So go vote for us. And there's a ton of other great content creators on there. So go vote for them. I think you get a couple votes. I think it's like up to 5 or whatever. So it's for actual IT blog and podcast. They split it out into 2 categories. And we are one option or finalist for the podcast side. So very humbled for that. So appreciate everybody listening and hanging out and raising our voice, if you will. So if you want to vote for that, you can check out the show notes for the websites to vote at. So I think voting goes into mid-February. So, but do it now, just get it out of the way. That'd be cool. Again, thanks for joining this week on the episode. This was really great. Again, thanks to John for coming and hanging out for a couple minutes and telling the story and talking cyber. That was really cool. We always enjoy a cyber guest here. Again, visit our website, soyouwannabeinit.com. You can subscribe to the show on the 1,000 platforms that are out there. Some of the big ones: iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, things of that nature. Or there's a plain RSS feed on there as well, a link, so you can get it however you get your RSS feeds. It's right there as well. So ratings on iTunes, right? That always helps them with their algorithm and get us to the top of the list and things of that nature. If you could throw us a rating on iTunes, that'd be awesome. Or simply tell a friend, right? That works too. Word of mouth is always good, even in today's technologically driven age. I think word of mouth does just as good, sometimes even a little better. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody that you meet on the street. So follow us on Twitter and Instagram, facebook.com/soyouwannabeinit. All the social handles, Twitter, Instagram, Discord server, all the invites are in our show notes or on our website. You want to do that, go for it. And again, we have a survey out there to help us understand you guys a little better, what you like, what you don't like, just some general knowledge just for us to tweak the show and help us out a little bit, understand who we are. So I'm going to check that out. It is in the show notes as well and on our website. So we're going to try to aggregate all that data and tweak it just a little bit to just the way our formats shows, and just to help you guys like us a little better. So again, that's it. Dean, awesome as always. We'll see you.
Thank you
again.
guys. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, John.
And thank you, John, so much. Been really insightful, and definitely have to have you back, buddy. It's been great.
Anytime. I'll say this: I'm on your Discord, so keep posting up there, and I'll be around.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, appreciate it. Thanks, John, and we'll see you guys next week.
Take care now. Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.